Do you want to learn how to make AI generated videos like Benny.Drop here? Well, I'm about to show you. Hello everybody, my name is Nick. I'm the founder of Silent Snow. Those of you who are subscribed and seeing this video, I apologize for my long absence. It's been a long time since I recorded a tutorial, but today we're going to be talking about how to achieve similar results to a top AI quote-unquote artist out there, in quotes, because I know it's a very muddy conversation, Benny.Drop. We're essentially going to be looking into his style, figuring out how to do this at a high level. I'm going to be going through the entire process, though I will not be talking about every single tool in depth throughout the way. There are plenty of other creators who could do that much better and have done that much better than I ever could, so definitely go take a look at them. I've linked them in the description and I will mention them later on in the video as we go through. So Benny.Drop has a ton of really great content here, but today we're actually going to be focusing on the samurai type of content and trying to replicate a very similar type of style, or at least create one clip from this type of video. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the first step in any artistic project obviously is reference, and in this particular case this is going to be our reference. But when it comes to AI text to image or text to video, creating videos like this, if you want to copy something explicitly, there are some tricks and tips that you can do, and one of them is reverse prompt engineering. So there are specific encoders out there and specific models that can reverse prompt an image, or can give you the best guess of what the prompt was in order to make it, because these images do not hold metadata for that type of stuff, at least not entirely from what I understand. So what I actually did to get a base of this, or to get like a starting point, was to actually take a screenshot of this and feed it to ChatGPT. So I essentially just came over to ChatGPT and said, hey, I've got a small task I need your assistance with, basically to reverse engineer this prompt, and what it gave me was this. So obviously I was not about to read through all of that, so I just said, okay, great, so now you'll find an example prompt for Midjourney. Midjourney is a text image generator out there. It's one of the most famous ones. Here's an example prompt. Basically apply all that information into the same style of a condensed prompt. And so from here you have a few different options. Once you have your prompt, kind of the vision that you see in your head put into words, there are a few different generators that you can go to, and the conversation of what image generator is the best, what model is the best, is quite a large one. If you're curious about who's kind of leading the way in large language models, or text to video, or text to image, I highly recommend going and subscribing to the channel Matt Pro. He's absolutely incredible. I've had personal conversations with Matt several times in the past throughout the years. His channel has been pretty much my only source of information when it comes to news about AI, so definitely go take a look. You won't be disappointed. His episodes are short, he keeps them really entertaining and fun, and he's just a good presenter. So if you're looking to understand more, that's where you can go to. But overall, the top kind of models that you can go to create your image would be Ideogram, Midjourney, Flux, which is the newest model out, I believe, at least at the time of recording, DALL-E, and Stable Diffusion. Those are about the only 5 that will really give you results close to this, and all of them have their own nuance. For example, each generator expects prompts a different way, so you can't just, for example, I could not just copy and paste this prompt into Stable Diffusion and expect a better result, for example. That's just not how it works. This would need to be adjusted to match Stable Diffusion specifically, though it really doesn't need that much adjustment, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So overall though, obviously, this is where I think the artistic iterative process kind of starts to come in, because you have to have an understanding of what you're trying to do. And one of the biggest problems in text to image generators overall, no matter which one you're picking, is consistency. Consistency in posing, consistency in prompt following, consistency in characters. Consistency in characters is essentially impossible when it comes to text to image, and not impossible as in it's not possible, but impossible as in it's not possible to create the same character every single time exactly. So that's one of the problems that you might run into, especially if you're trying to do something really consistent and the same, like what Benny.Drop is doing here, right? If you notice, every single pose is pretty much the same. The hands are meeting in the same spot every single time. The face, or the head, and like as in where the head location is almost identical every time. The only pose that's different here is this one. This is the only one that's slightly different, but even then it's really the same. So there's a question of how do you get this amount of control? How do you get a specific look every single time? Because if I were to re-roll this, right, even if we look at these 4 images in and of themselves, this is all of these images were created with the same prompt, right? So why are they so drastically different? And again, this is where you have to have an understanding, where the artistic element comes in, where you have to be knowledgeable in these different generators and how they work in order to get a desired result. That's why I largely say that people argue there's no such thing as an AI artist, or that there's really no art in AI, and to some extent I disagree when you begin getting into workflows like this, where it goes beyond just generating a simple image. That's when we can really start to get interesting results. But even here, look, so this one is definitely much closer. Actually, in fact, we can take a closer look at this. So this one's obviously much closer to what we're going for, and we could actually use this. But if we want to be even more detailed, want to make sure that things are tidied up, I would really recommend using Stable Diffusion the most. So essentially right now, just so we recap where we're at, came up with our reference and our idea, we came up with our prompt, and then from that prompt we started generating images. The first text-to-image generator we used is Midjourney, what we're looking at right now. Midjourney, known for its high detail, not so known for following prompts. So what is another text-to-image generator option that might give us better results, higher fidelity, or maybe match our image a little bit closer? Well, to answer that, I would have to say Stable Diffusion. Now, this may look very scary to you if you're not familiar with text-to-image at all. It may look like home if you spend a lot of time in Stable Diffusion. If you do, then you're going to be really happy with what I have to say, because it shouldn't go beyond anything you don't already know. But for those of you that are unfamiliar with Stable Diffusion, it's actually not as complicated as it looks. Essentially, up here we've got our positive prompt, what we want the image, what we want to be in the image, what we're trying to generate. Here's our negative prompt, where it's what we don't want to see essentially in the image. And we've got our generation settings. So there's obviously a few different tabs here, but for this particular purpose, these don't particularly matter for what we're trying to do. So and honestly, each of these pretty much needs its own video. But sticking to the generation tab, here we have our sampling methods, and this is basically how the image is processed and what type of latent space I believe is used to generate that image. I very well could be wrong, but essentially if you pick, what you really need to know is depending on which of these you pick, your image will be higher realism, lower realism, etc. And likewise, all these other metrics slash sliders slash variables do as well. Your steps being how many kind of iterations the model takes on the image before it considers it complete. To some extent can be considered detail, but this is very dependent on the model that you're using, because what we're using is Stable Diffusion, or what we call Stable Diffusion is not technically Stable Diffusion. This is actually called, this user interface is actually called Automatic 1111, which was the user interface created to run the original Stable Diffusion 1.5 model. So this is just a platform that was created to run the actual Stable Diffusion model, but they've kind of become synonymous, kind of like how Velcro, the company, has become synonymous with the product that they create. It's the same type of idea here. We're actually not running Stable Diffusion as a model at all. We're running a Flux model called Aphrodite. So Aphrodite is based off of the new Flux Dev model, as far as I understand, and like I mentioned earlier, Flux Dev and Flux Schnell are two of the newer models out there that are the best for text-to-image ever, as far as we understand. So we're using a highly realistic model, much better than Midjourney, and we have the ability to kind of fine-tune what our generation settings look like. We can be very specific. We are able to assign a weight to different variables in our prompts, so we can point the model in the direction that, hey, this is more important, for example, right? Essentially, what we get is an image with higher control, higher fidelity, and more thought, which I think is really what I want to point out here when it comes to the conversation of can AI art be art? This is obviously already a longer video. By now, you've seen a lot of the thought, a lot of the nuance and niche ideas that come into play when you're trying to generate a video like this. So I guess right now I'll pose the question, with where we are in the workflow, in the process, would you begin to consider this to be art? Even this image right here, could you even assign this some artistic value? Let me know. But But regardless, the main point here is that we're, beginning to iterate. We're beginning to think outside the box, not just taking the first generation that we get and throwing it through an image to video model and calling it a day. Even with just one generation, we get a really, really, really great result. And so there's a question now, how do you turn this into a video? So if you look at our settings and how we've generated this image, if we look at our image settings and the scale of the image, it's 540 by 960. So that's our 1080 by 1920 image divided by 2. So we've just lowered the resolution to get the image, and now in the same generation process, we have a high-res fix that is upscaling the image from the original resolution all the way up to 1350 by 2400. So let's reiterate one more time on the process thus far. Came up with our idea and our reference, came up with a prompt, decided on an image generator, generated our image, upscaled that image, and now what do we do? If you're generating in Midjourney, for example, let's say you wanted to use this image. Midjourney does not natively come with an upscaler, but you can upscale it here subtly or creatively, but you can also just use upscalers online. If you are an avid Stable Diffusion user, you can upscale in Stable Diffusion, but either way, my best recommendation would be to upscale this, but not overkill it. So now that we've got our upscaled image, it's a question of how do we generate it into a video? And the easy answer to that is not CapCut. We'll get to that. It's actually Runway. And so you can see a video I've done before. So here's the base image, very similar to what we already made. This is unaltered. This is the raw generation. And this was the result that we got from it. So the one that you saw at the beginning of this video, right? Pretty solid, very interesting. Little bit of a jitter here, but still a pretty solid image. So taking your generated image, so now that we've got our image into Runway, I wanted to call out one thing that I mentioned earlier, which is that every single generator, AI generator, whether it's a large language model or text to image or text to video or text to 3D model, text to texture, it does not matter. They all have different ways that they need to be prompted. And this is just a quote-unquote limitation of AI. I wouldn't even call it a limitation, but it is difficult to translate between different models, right? So when it comes to Runway, they actually have a full guide on how to generate their images. They have an enhance prompt here, which can actually improve your prompt. So if we click on that, you'll see, there you go. They also have different presets that you can use if you wanted to use different ones. They have resolution, HD, or standard. Actually, I did not even know that, so we're gonna go HD this time around. And also, one thing I want to call out is obviously Runway has different models, and when it comes to doing horizontal video, for example, Gen 3 Alpha does not have vertical, but their Gen 3 Alpha Turbo does. Don't ask me how or why, it just does. So we can do the aspect ratio, and then of course, see one thing I want to call out, and it will lead us to our next step after we generate the video, is that this resolution only comes out to 720p. Regardless, here's our prompt: slow motion pan, luxurious and extravagant night stands on a white studio backdrop, and let's hit generate. So now our video is generated. That took not even 10 seconds. We can give it a look. And we can see that the quality is pretty good. If we upscale it, obviously, again, it downscaled our image to 720 to make the video, which is also at 720p. So all that upscaling information that we had, we've pretty much lost, and we need to get it back. So now how do we take this video and upscale it to social media level quality? So first thing you're gonna do is obviously download the video and then just save it somewhere safe. After that, you're gonna go to the description and you're gonna click on the CapCut AI upscaler link. So I found this last night. It's particularly interesting. I didn't know CapCut was built different like this, but they essentially let you convert up to double. So we can get back to even higher quality than the original image that we uploaded. So pretty interesting stuff. Once it loads the image, you're more than welcome to just upscale it. There we go. So now we can kind of see, the upscaled version. So same video, but upscaled, and it looks great, but you can see we've got a little bit of flicker happening here. And there are a bunch of ways that you can fix that. There are plugins, for example, for After Effects, for Premiere Pro, for DaVinci Resolve, for probably even CapCut, that can help you denoise images. And so that's essentially all that really needs to happen here. But if we compare now, right? So here's the video that we've got, right? And now we can go back to Benny.Drop. We can see it's very similar, right, with the motion. And again, there's post-processing happening here. Odds are he had a very similar generation the first time around for that initial clip, but cut it. or lengthened it. And also one thing I want to point out, right? So we've got our video converted, but now one thing I want to call out, if we look at this video, something about it still feels AI, right? And aside from the flickering, what it is it's the frame rate. The frame rate, typically we expect, especially really high detailed things, we expect them to be at a high frame rate, roughly between 60 and 120 frames per second. This video, if we actually look at it and look at our properties, this video is actually at 24 frames per second. So we need to figure out how to upscale it to 60. And typically, you can't. You can go down, but you can't go up. You can go from 60 to 24, but it's tough to go from 24 to 60 because you have to essentially make frames that don't exist. That's called interpolation. So what tools are out there for us to interpolate this footage? Well, once again, we're gonna go to CapCut. But this time you actually have to install the real CapCut, the actual application, and not the web-based version. So once we get CapCut, we can go ahead and open it. Very, very simple. If you're not familiar with video editing, this is basically your timeline. This is where the preview will be played. Here's all your settings and information, and here are your transitions, effects, footage otherwise. So we're just gonna simply drag and drop this in, and now we can see our footage is in here, right? And if we play it back, it's gonna play back at 24 frames. Well, actually it looks like 30 frames per second because that's what our timeline says. So here we are playing back at 30 FPS, but like you said, we need it at 60. So how do we do that here? Well, essentially you just drag and drop your video, head over to this export tab, make sure that your documents and stuff are selected. Our resolution is going to be 2K, and then also we're going to change our frame rate to 60. So now if we go ahead and export the footage, it's going to render and generate. It's going to ask if we want to share it, which we don't. But now if we take a look at this video, we can see it's a lot cleaner, a lot smoother. It's still not quite as detailed as we'd probably like it to be, but still, you know, good enough for our use. And we can add on top of this, right? So now this is where I really want to talk about the art argument, because sure, you can go ahead and you could leave it like this, right? And you are more than welcome to post that as your own and say, hey, look at what I made. But where Benny.Drop really thrives is the fact that he goes a level beyond it. He puts it together into edit. He makes several different variations. He really tries to think outside the box and apply his own style and kind of vision to these concepts, especially these are really amazing, right? So he's able to kind of think outside the box. What does that look like now for our particular project? Well, that's where we open up After Effects, and it doesn't have to be After Effects. It can be a video editor of your choice, anything that kind of lets you mess around with the colors, the contrast, anything along those ends, because that's essentially all we're going to do now. It's just a matter of refining the image, refining any edits that you want to do. Maybe you want to put stuff behind the character and rotoscope him out. You're more than welcome to do that. There's a lot that you can do from this point, but essentially I'm just going to do a quick time lapse of kind of the coloring process. And there you go, now you have it. That's just about it. You can see I've added our deflicker, which is helping a little bit. I mean, it's extremely consistent. You could tell that this is AI probably, but you'd need to look very, very closely. So that's pretty much the entire workflow. Just some basic adjustments. We've got our deflicker, some adjustments to the color levels, brightness and contrast, a saturation, noise, and then a grain. So very simple on the post-processing side, but you could add overlays to this. You could add text, for example, like we saw on Benny.Drop's page, right, with these to give it a little bit more life, make it feel more legit. But that's just about it. It's really not entirely that tedious. It's not entirely that difficult. If you're looking to kind of learn more, as I said, about stable diffusion, text to image, definitely go look at MatVid Pro and Olivio Sarikis. Both of those guys are incredibly knowledgeable in what they do. But overall, that's just about all you need in order to go from this to this. Thank you everybody for watching. If you've got any questions whatsoever, any comments, questions, concerns, thoughts, points of view, feel free to leave them in the comments. We read everything and we'll definitely get back to you. So thank you for watching, guys, and we'll see you later.